And that's part of the reason why, in my humble opinion, that people aren't reaching out and taking advantage of these services that are being offered, because there's a trust issue. And there's a trust issue from the top down to the bottom up. We all have to take ownership. But if you feel that if you fall and no one's going to be there within your agency to pick you up, you tell me. Why would you tell anyone anything?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another blah, 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 something wellness podcast. We are kicking off a new month and a new topic. So we are sliding into everything around failure and what it means to actually be successful by failing forward. So on that note, we're going to go around. I'm your host, Tami Sharp. My partner in all things, Chris Zamora. If you want to give a little quick intro of who you are, and we will go around and have everybody introduce themselves.
Yeah, Chris Zamora, retired law enforcement from Arizona. I did 23 years, did various investigations positions, and my niche was undercover narcotics. And I am the CEO of Law Enforcement Coaching with Tami Sharp.
Hey, John Kelly. Yes, John Kelly, 30-year veteran, retired now, started a life leadership wellness program for our people and just paying it forward.
Thank you for being here. Vid.
My pleasure.
Oh, hi, Vin Scotto. I was with the New York City Police Department for 20 years, and I've been on the other side of a police career now for 13 years. And I am currently working with law enforcement coaching with Tami, Chris, and the rest of the gang.
Thank you for being here. Mike?
Thank you.
Hey, Mike Riley. I'm a retired lieutenant from the New York City Police Department. Before I joined the military, joined the NYPD. I was in the Army Reserves, and right now I'm part of the coaching team, and I'm enjoying the journey.
Awesome. Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Graff. I've spent over 20 years in public service. I've served across 3 states in a variety of law enforcement and public safety roles. I've been in Pennsylvania, Arizona, and now North Carolina. I've also served as a military police officer in the Air National Guard. I've done patrol, school resource, detective, and most recently, I also have joined with law enforcement coaching, and I'm just so excited to continue my service career in this way.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. And it's really cool. We have a big group, and you guys have all successfully navigated a career in law enforcement, as well as being successful in other endeavors. So let's kind of start the baseline, because for the listeners, the intention of this conversation is, threefold, really. It's one, to motivate. If you are trying to figure out how to maybe promote up, or you're learning the ropes, whatever that is, guess what? In order to be successful, you're going to fail, and that's okay. So we kind of want to normalize what it means to fail fast, get moving. Like, don't dwell on it. If you have failed, if you have screwed up, and you're sitting there just spinning those internal wheels of like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that. I could have did it, whatever. We want to get you past that. So we're going to try to give you guys some techniques and tips to move past failing and really what that looks like. So when kicking off this conversation, I'm going to throw you guys all real quick. What's a time or a story that you can think of that pops into your mind where you kind of had an epic fail? What did that look like for you?
How long do we have?
What's your story?
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay. So as you know, Tami, I write these humorous police stories based upon my experience and just kind of building it out. And one of the ones that I recently wrote has become like a punchline to a joke with this group of friends that I worked with at the time that we acquainted years later, and we see each other on a regular basis. And pretty much every time I see them, this comes up. So real quick, I was a new police officer. I had maybe a year on the police department. Mike, you might be familiar with this location. I worked in the Greenwich Village section of New York City, and I was assigned to Washington Square Park. Now, for your listeners, if you don't know this locale, it's a lot of history. It's extremely eclectic. It almost feels like you were brought back in time and you were living through Woodstock all over again. So I'm this new cop, and I'm assigned to a post in Washington Square Park. And it's getting close to end of tour. And we hear this guttural scream at the other end of the park. And we just beat feet. We start running to the location. Now, as we get there, without really knowing what's happening, I'm thinking there's a robbery in progress. Now, Mike, you remember how we would carry a mag light, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The mag light was used other than illuminating objects. Sometimes you used it as a weapon. I swing this mag light thinking I'm hitting the perp. He wasn't a perp. It was two gentlemen. One was pleasing the other. I'll leave it at that. Long story short, the mag light goes flying, breaks open, batteries go everywhere. I'm this young kid. I'm embarrassed. And my mind's racing a million miles per hour. So I utter, I'll take the collar, but who are we going to say hit him? Now, they all look at me and like, you just hit this guy with your mag light. What do you mean who hit him? Now, in my mind, what I'm thinking is, how do I articulate an arrest? Obviously, we had indecent exposure. We had other things that I could articulate, but it was an embarrassing moment nonetheless. To make a long story short, the two people involved were embarrassed. There was no injury, believe it or not, and they just wanted to leave. And that was the end of it. And we went end of tour. But it's been 30 years since this has happened. I go golfing with these guys. We go to a funeral. We get together for lunch. It comes up every time. Who are we going to say hit him? Every single time. Now, this is self-deprecating humor, obviously. But at the time, it was embarrassing because you don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to get in trouble. And it's not like I engaged in brutality. This was something I thought I knew what it was. I reacted. It was the wrong call. It was embarrassing. Thank God nothing came of it. Everyone just wanted to go on their way. So I hope that's okay for your audience.
We're running in hot for this one.
I really dumbed it down. I didn't want.
No, what was like kind of a lesson, or how did that shift how you handled calls going forward? What did you learn from the experience?
So what I learned was what you see might not actually be what it is. You need to almost take as best as you can. We don't have the luxury, but if you're able to kind of think a little quicker and maybe take a little bit more in, because there wasn't a sense of urgency per se. But in my youthful police mind, all excited, thinking I have like, this real good arrest. I got this robbery arrest and stuff. You guys all know. You're running to the scene. You got your adrenaline going. And I'm thinking, oh, I got this big arrest and I'm going to make overtime, right? And that just wasn't the case. So what I learned from that, after the smoke cleared and I got over the embarrassment, hey, you need to kind of rein it in a little bit. Not be so gung-ho.
All right, awesome. Who else wants to share something?
All right, I'll give you another Manhattan story.
Mike!
So I was a cop in Midtown North, and I was in FTU at the time. And then I'll give you a name that'll be a blast from the past, probably Chief Ali.
Yes.
He was so Chief Ali was my first commanding officer when I got to Midtown North. So I was brand new in FTU, our field training unit. and I was with a guy who was a transit rollover. So back in the day, it used to be transit and housing were separate police departments. And if they wanted to roll over to the NYPD, they had to go through a brief academy, and then they would do the FTU with us who came out originally with NYPD. So he grabs us and he takes us in his unmarked and he goes, "Come on, kids, I'm going to get you a collar." So we're in the back seat. I'm in the car with him and the community affairs officer. And we're going through Times Square on a 6 to 2, right? 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. And 3-card Monte is a big condition over there, right? They're playing 3-card Monte. They're robbing the tourists. They're, pickpocketing them, everything. So we're in the car, and and I'll give you a picture of this. It's Times Square. You got the pictures, the stores all behind them. You got the Sbarro shop that was there. It was a kind of like a sausage place. Yeah, it's still there, right? So lights, cameras, everything. It's like Hollywood, right? So all of a sudden he sees the 3-card. I see them. He goes, "You see him?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Get him." I jump out of the car. I pull my firearm and I point it at the dealer and I'm like, "Please don't move." And he goes, "Whoa, easy, cowboy, easy, cowboy. Cuff him." So I put my firearm away. I go in, I cuff him. We bring him back. It's my first collar. He grabs me on the side. He goes, "All right, kid, you did a good job, but you don't need to pull the gun out." And that was failing forward. It never happened again. I realized it real quick. I'll give you a second one. I'm on a foot post with another female, with a female who was in RFTU, and same location, different day. She puts over 10:13. We got a jumper on the building. We got a jumper. ESU. Everybody comes running. Fire department responds. Everybody shows up. I'm with her. I'm like, "Wait a second. That's a mannequin." So yes, I had a couple of. Thank God I didn't put it over the air, but I was part of the unit that was there, so I had a couple of things to learn from.
That was pretty good. John, you got any stories?
I think, right? I think there's failing professionally and failing personally. And I think to not discuss the personal, because I think there's always some bleed over, right? And so I think the reason why we end up thinking that the failure or the misattempt is defining is because leadership doesn't allow you to move forward after you fail. And so if I fail at something and then I'm written up, I'm benched, the walls start falling in on me, then that ruins me moving forward because I don't see the benefit. There's no lesson learned. There's no opportunity to grow. So I think part of failing is leadership allowing people to fail and not crucifying them when they do. Because it gets to be hard to find the lesson. Well, what did I learn? I'm docked pay and I'm suspended for a month. That's going to be my takeaway ultimately if I'm not allowed to grow from the failure. So I would say, like, first and foremost, we got to show our people a little bit of grace. Like, we talk a good game when it comes to failure, but we're really shitty at doling out. Like, all we want to do is dole out punishment, and we don't want to actually fix the problem or the deficiency and allow that person to grow from it so they can fail forward, right? So, like, I think that needs to be, like, I could tell you a gazillion, terrible stories about times where I did not measure up. I was fortunate enough to be given and shown grace so I could learn the positive from showing up to work intoxicated. I could have got terminated, but instead I was given an opportunity to go get help and get services. Like, so I can, extrapolate, well, yeah, that was an amazing opportunity. Had I been terminated, finding that lesson, it's a little more difficult, right? And so
John, it's interesting you say that And I totally concur. And Mike, you've heard this as a supervisor. When we would go to when you get promoted, you go to what's called BMOC, and you have a lot of people that come to speak to you, a lot of supervisors. And I remember a captain, and Mike, you might be familiar with him. His name was Nespresso, and he came to speak to us. And what he said, and it stuck with me for my whole career. He said, "You criticize in private, and you praise in public." And unfortunately, and Mike could attest to this, and I'm sure the rest of you can, in the New York City Police Department, unfortunately, that doesn't happen too often. The egos are just ridiculous. And you're right, John, that has to change because it ties into the mental wellness piece, and to be able to be good at our job and to be proficient, to have that support. So that's a good point you make.
Yeah, I
And I
think
think
that it's just one of those things, you know, from the professional side of the house.
Yeah, and I think individually we have to learn from our mistakes, and we'll command. Will they do something so that we learn from it? Some will, some won't. But we have to take it upon ourselves individually to find the lesson there. And then on a previous episode, you said something. Never let anybody live in your head rent free. And that right there is something we need to really focus on, because yes, if we did something out of policy or what have you, and we got in trouble, we're going to I always say, just give me my lumps and I'll move on with life. But I'm not going to allow them to live in my head rent free. Like I'm an inferior cop because I did this, right? If I did something out of policy, then I'll live with it. I'll live with whatever they want to give me as punishment. And I've done that. And I've sat in a room with a lieutenant who's under they weren't too happy with my caseload, in that I was letting cases go by for too long, right? And so I got written up for it. And the lieutenant explained it to me. Here's what's happening, Chris. Da, 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 da. I said, yep, that's accurate. I am behind on my cases, and I'll take whatever punishment you want to give me. And he said, I appreciate that. You didn't come up with excuses. You didn't say this or that. You just took it like a man. And then now we move on. That lieutenant never lived rent free in my head after that, right? Because again, what did I do? Now I'm gonna get on my cases and try not to let that happen again. So I don't want to blame everything on command, because that's a convenient excuse, in my opinion, if we blame everything on command. Again, like Vince said, never let anybody live rent free up in your head.
Hey, Chris, just in full transparency, and I appreciate you remembering that, because it stayed with me even to this day. Believe it or not, that was spoken to me in my personal life. That wasn't even a police related thing. And not to get off topic, I was going through the beginning stages of a divorce, and it was rough, and it was in my brain. I was questioning myself as a father. Now I have this broken family, and I don't come from that. And you go through all the ruminations, and that's when someone said to me, wait a second, don't let them live rent free in your head. And I never forgot it.
Well, and it applies to not only your personal life, but also at work, right? Because we're dealing with people that don't like us. And a majority of the population, they're pro police. They love us. It's that small percentage that's usually the loudest. They're the ones that typically will live in our head rent free, right? So we have to be mindful not to allow that to happen.
Yeah, it's really when you say living rent free, I'm like the worst overthinker there can be. And I found early on that whenever I would make a mistake, I would ruminate. I would play it over in my head, trying to figure out, where did I go wrong? Or did that person, take what I was saying as the way I intended it to be heard? And I think after spending some time, being a ruminator and being someone who has let others live rent free for a long time, I've learned that if you're ruminating on something, if you are continuing to think over something, it really helps to break down the situation into why am I ruminating? Was I embarrassed? Was it because of a way that I might have been perceived? Was it a social embarrassment? Was it a self-worth embarrassment? Oh, I must not be cut out for this, or others are going to think less of me. Is it do I belong here? Once you really distill the issue down, you can really identify some old scripts that maybe it's not about this time that I, crashed my patrol car. Maybe it's about me thinking I don't belong here. Let's think about that. Try to find the what was really embarrassing about the thing that happened, and try to learn from it.
You know what, Tiffany? It's funny you say that, and it's another thing that really resonates with me, and I appreciate that. So, like where we're at in this coaching world, one of the things that I've learned with myself, coming from a background of actual sports coaching and working with young athletes, was this. It's like you can't go back, right? So you can't look in the rear view, and you really can't look too far out front. You got to kind of learn to stay in the moment, and that's easier said than done, right? So one of the things I came to realize, and I think this is just us, human nature, and it goes back to like the caveman and woman days. We're always on the defensive. So what about flipping the script and being a little more offensive minded and kind of pressing pause? John used the word grace, which I really like, pressing pause on that negative stuff, and then having this paradigm shift where we start thinking about the positive piece. And we all know that's easier said than done, but we can accomplish it. And I know for a fact that that's something that we could talk to the people that are listening and that we work with. I think it's very powerful. So that's an interesting way to look at it, the way you bring that to the table.
Well, and Tiffany, you mentioned the self-worth part. And here's this. So Chris and I are both clinical hypnotherapists. So we work with the subconscious, and something that we learned a long time ago, which really hit a chord with me, is that every single person on the planet, if you are a human, you have these subconscious beliefs of either not being good enough or not being lovable in some regard. And that starts early in our childhood. And the way that our childhood, and it's little things, it can be the littlest things that kind of create our belief around ourselves. I remember when we were going through our hypnotherapy school, one of my classmates, she had a fear around public speaking or not being good enough, and she didn't know where it came from. And when she went back through hypnosis to find out, it went to like kindergarten, where somebody wouldn't share a glue stick with her and kind of like made fun of her, and it hurt her feelings. And that's an emotional trauma, even though we look at that like it's not a big deal. When you have been sheltered as a child and now you have somebody hurts your feelings, that is an emotional wound. It plants a seed, and it's like, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. And then that will continue to grow, and our subconscious almost looks for things to reinforce the stories that we've created behind the scenes. So when you are failing in something, you do something, you mess up, you embarrass yourself or whatever, if you're emotionally triggered, you need to, like you said, Tiffany, look at the why, and it can go back really far into little things of that not good enough. I also, John, you had mentioned, I don't want to skip this. You mentioned showing up to work drunk. And that's something within the wellness space, I think, that we're all talking about more. When we go to do trainings, and I don't know how this is for you, John, but we always ask, what are some of the biggest issues within law enforcement when it comes to wellness? Drinking is always, alcohol is always one of the top answers. And I think departments now have the awareness. Before it was like, you're drunk, you're out, bye, and no help. So then, you fire the person, and that's not going to help. They're not going to go get help. They're going to spiral more and drink more and beat themselves up. So departments now having the awareness and having the access to resources, that if you do have an officer that is showing up drunk, if they are self-sabotaging, take a pause, whether you keep them on or not, but take a pause and really help get that person into some sort of program. And you kind of got to force it. And you guys, I know that you guys all have your stories on this, so we can talk a little bit about that. On the West Coast over here in California, there's a really amazing group, First Responder Wellness, and you can send people from across the country to go in person to their rehab facility, and it's specifically for first responders. It's phenomenal. Are you guys aware of anything like that on the East Coast?
Yeah, Mike could speak on this too. Not that we were there, but the New York City Police Department had a program. They called it the farm, but it's similar to what you're talking about. And I had worked with a handful of people that they were there for, a 30-day stint.
Hmm.
And, it worked for some people, other people it didn't. They either went again or they were subsequently fired. But the NYPD had a program like that, for as long as I was on the job.
Yeah, they have the peer-to-peer support is really instrumental in New York City with the New York City Police Department. It's active duty members who are volunteer counselors when it comes to alcohol abuse, and that it really they make a tremendous impact. And there's incidents where if it's involved, like if you're drunk off duty, because you're never off duty, you're always on duty. So you can be suspended even if you're off duty and you're intoxicated, whether you have your firearm on you or not. So the difference between the the actual department getting involved and the peer-to-peer support is how it's handled. So the peer-to-peer support would be that you are taken in as a health issue, right? And there's no disciplinary record. We're going to get you the help. We're going to send you to what we call the farm, right? But it's also, you're going to have a peer counselor. But if the department is the one who institutes it, discipline is going to be attached to that. And what they call it is, we have interim orders, right? So we have interim orders, we have personnel orders. So the piece that I'm talking about here is called an interim order, and it's interim order number 9. It's longstanding. It's probably around 30 years, if not longer. And that interim order number 9 says that you are put on restricted duty, but it doesn't have an impact on your career. And that's the peer-to-peer piece where they got that. That was a negotiation with our unions to be able to do that. But like I said, if it's impacted by if it's initiated by the department, then it's not an interim order number 9. It'll be a disciplinary record.
Mike, if I could take it one step further, and Tammy, we spoke about this offline, and I don't know if you remember it. I think you would ask me a question about what was my experience in the mental wellness space while I was active, and Mike would concur on this. They are forward thinking, whether they had the system in place. So for me, I never had an alcohol problem, but with me, when I was going through that divorce, I was circling the drain, and we had a peer support program where I was assigned a retired officer. I met him for coffee. He tried to talk it through. It wasn't enough for me, and thankfully, I was able to be assigned temporarily to the employee relations department, where they actually took me off the roll call for a period of time, and I was assigned a clinician. That was my full-time job, where I had to get my serotonin levels right. I was on mood-altering medication. I was going for therapy, and no one knew about it. No one knew. And I don't think a lot of officers are aware that exists, because they always think that if I tell someone that I'm struggling, they're going to suspend me. I'm going to get modified. Maybe I'll get fired. They'll take my guns away. I was that bad where I knew if I didn't do something, there were going to be dire consequences. When I tell you, I'm getting chills talking about it, because I feel so lucky that I was able to have that program, and it worked for me. Thank God.
Yeah. And it's not, we got to remember too, that when we talk about this wellness, it's not necessarily just, the guys and girls getting together afterwards and drinking and all that stuff. Line of duty injuries play a major part in this. And oftentimes, you get into an RMP accident, a radio motor patrol accident, on patrol, you get into a car accident, you wind up taking, some opioids that they assign you or whatever. There have been officers that have got addicted to them, and all because of a line of duty injury. And what Vin is talking about there plays a major factor in that as well, where now they are aware of these things and they give those supports. They have those peer-to-peer mentors to help those officers get back on track, right? And I think that's when the general public thinks about that, they don't realize the compounding effect of getting into an RMP accident. getting involved in maybe you're involved in a shooting, right? And you have PTSD and it's undiagnosed, right? These are things that I think officers need to be able to, and we need to explain that to them, that these are things that are available to them, and it's other officers that can help them. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a negative connotation.
I'm so glad to hear from everyone about these different resources out there because, I'm thinking that wellness in the law enforcement community space is kind of a relatively new thing, and maybe even more common in your larger departments that might, have more resources. So I'm learning, something new every time I am in one of these conversations, and I'd love to hear from our listeners if they have access to these kind of peer supports, these kind of programs at the departments they work at, because it still seems very new and very sporadic. And I think when we talk about peer support and the support from the other from your coworkers, I think that is such an important piece of it, because I feel like in law enforcement and military, it is ingrained in the DNA of officers to
Rub some dirt on it.
to of course tough it out, but also to make fun of each other as a way to show how much we care. I've seen where folks that have made mistakes or failed, they'll come in the department the next day and there's something posted on the wall about them, or we're retelling those stories about how so and so screwed up, and it is such a part of like our DNA. And some people don't find that endearing. Some people don't feel like, oh, he's making fun of you, that means he likes you.
It's a double-edged
Some people don't
sword.
get that.
It's a
Right,
double-edged
right.
sword. Sometimes the humor is warranted to kind of bring the temperature down, but other times, to your point before, ruminating about, oh, I effed up, and now they're making fun of me and they're compounding it. That's tough. That's tough.
Well, and I want to jump in really quick. One, if you're a leader and say somebody does screw up and everybody's kind of giving them a hard time, which, there's balance to that. But I would also say if you are a supervisor or leader, at some point, pull that person aside privately and be like, hey, all jokes aside, are you okay? Let's talk it through, and kind of coach them through it. And then really quick, before we keep going into the conversation, I wanted to circle back because John dropped a couple other resources. So John, can you speak on those resources a little bit?
Sure. On the East Coast, I know we have down in South Florida, FHE Shatterproof. It's a first responder only program, and there's various tracks that depending on the needs of the individual. And to the north, northern Florida, we have in Jacksonville, Lakeside Health, which is, they take a different approach from FHE, where they don't differentiate between law enforcement or not. They treat the human condition. So it's two different approaches. Both are very successful, and they're widely used throughout the country. They have people like Pat Fitzgibbons on staff down in South Florida, who was a veteran, was in law enforcement, was a client of FHE at one point, and now he's doing his clinicals because he's actually come full circle there. So there's a lot of programs available with what we would call culturally competent, really well vetted people that want nothing but the best for you.
Well, and I want to, for the listeners too, what I'm going to do, if you look in the description of this, I'm going to share a whole bunch of resources. So for December, I believe it is, we're going deep dive into addiction and alcohol. That's going to be the topic of the month. But before that, if you are somebody if you are yourself drinking or dealing with something, but also for the spouses that are listening, if you are dealing with your person saying, nope, I'm fine. dealing with addiction is hard on any level. It's very hard in the first responder field because there's so much pride and people are, functioning alcoholics, functioning addicts. I don't have a problem. There's all sorts of excuses. So feel free to reach out to any of us to kind of be like, hey, how do I navigate, or what kind of resource could you recommend? We are happy to help move that needle for whoever needs those resources, but I will share them in the description across all of the platforms we're on. Thank you guys for having that conversation, and kind of sharing. I also wanted to talk about, so the divorce rate. Vin, you were talking about your divorce. It's common. Like, we talk about it when we go to our trainings, and we talk about the statistics for the divorce rate for first responders is like, what, 70%? It's something absolutely ridiculous. But there's no support, there's no training, there's no coaching. It's kind of like, it's part of the job. You knew what, and I, you guys can tell me, but my understanding, people kind of joke like, oh, you're on your first wife or whatever. There's a lot of, again, bad humor going around these things. I want to share, like, a lot of our team, they've been married for 20, 30 years happily. And so divorce is not it's not, if you're going to be with an officer, you're going to get divorced. That is not what happens. I have been divorced. It had nothing to do with law enforcement. Divorce happens. But there are definitely some things that you can do to avoid that. And again, self-awareness and kind of talking about some stuff. Do you guys have any?
Tami, so
Yeah.
when you said that with the divorce, it just popped into my head. When I was going through it, and after I was on the other side of it, at least the initial stages, and I was back, full duty and all that stuff, I confided in another supervisor, that I was going through some challenging times because my children were young and just this new way of life. And he, on one hand, it felt like a compliment, but now that I think about it, fast forward. So he said, he goes, Vin, he said, I would have never known that you were going through this because you come to work and you're the same guy. Like, we work with certain people. You can tell something's going on at home or in their personal life, and they take it out on the public. That wasn't me. But now, fast forward, when I think about it, it felt like a red badge of courage then, but maybe I should have dug a little deeper and kind of maybe had some follow-up in terms of my mental wellness. Because I kind of, after I was on the other side of it and I felt pretty good again, I pressed pause. And you know this, Tami, everything came back again with a vengeance in my post-career. Because I healed, but I never fully healed. I was still putting a Band-Aid on an open wound for a long time. And it took me a long time to realize that, being on the other end, on the other side of a police career. I mean, what if, would have, could have, should have. It just popped into my head. Like, I took that as like this red badge of courage. Wow, okay, I am resilient. Maybe not. Maybe I could have maybe used some more help, more follow-up, if that makes sense.
No, and it's good. But how long did it take you to have that self-awareness?
Like I said, it just popped into my head now.
Just now. John, did you have?
Yeah. So, I mean, this topic is near and dear to my heart, right? We all know, and maybe the listener doesn't know, but they need to know that for every bad guy that kills one of us, 2 to 3 of us take our own life. Half the time, that's the result of a divorce or a relationship breakup. And so the question, so we've got a very dangerous occupation, right? Nobody's going to say it's not. But statistically, you're the biggest threat to you going home, period. And we know statistically the reason why you take your own life is because, now listen, getting a divorce can be the absolute best thing that needs to happen for everybody involved, right? I'm not saying don't get a divorce. But what I am saying is it needs to be an informed decision and not an emotional one. But if we know statistically that failing in a relationship statistically is going to be the thing that allows you to take your own life, and we not only do we refuse to acknowledge that statistic, but we don't provide any training to make you a better spouse. And what year are we in? This isn't a statistic that just popped up last year. This has been going on since we've been keeping statistics. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to provide guidance, training, mentorship. Who gives it? Listen, you'll figure out the traffic stop, right? We could train a monkey to do a traffic stop. How do you communicate with your spouse? How do you communicate with your kids? Not traumatizing them. We're not sharing war stories, but how do you keep a relationship in this profession healthy and growing? Those are the skill sets our people need. And to not have that in place as a go-to, I think is one of the biggest failures of our profession for its members.
We're more reactive, not proactive with a lot of stuff, unfortunately.
Well, exactly, Vin, but there's nothing, we don't need to, we're not reacting to, the reaction's over. It's like, it's not new information.
Yeah, it's too late.
This is stuff that should be loaded on the front end from the academy with bringing in the family unit. I posted something on LinkedIn about this today. Like, we got families, man. They are our support system, or they're not. And if we don't keep them with us and providing them the resources that they need to deal with us in this journey, then man, we're just missing opportunities left and right to thrive and live healthy lives.
And that's one of the things, being on the other side, I recognized, when I look back and you look at your younger self and your time on the police department, I never took that uniform off in a way. That control piece, being responsible for taking control of a situation and making quick decisions, that carried over into my personal life. And it took me a long time to realize that. And like John said, maybe if I would have had the tools while I was active, and I'm not blaming anyone, I take full ownership of my decisions. But now that I'm more aware and maybe more evolved, hopefully, I can recognize that. And hey, you could have been better. Not to say the outcome wouldn't have been the same, but maybe if I had some better tools that were taught to me, like John is saying, I could have been better in my relationship.
Of course, Vin. You could. Yeah. There's no way that you wouldn't have. You don't know what you don't know. And that's why in this second chapter, it's incumbent upon us, all six of us, to move this conversation and to force people to look in the mirror, have tough conversations, and then when they're done looking in the mirror, have the resources and skill sets available to them so they can
take action,
improve the quality of their lives. That's what you guys are doing as coaches, right?
John,
and
John, you're 1,000% right. I mean, this is why we're here. This is why we're having this discussion, because we didn't have that throughout our career. Because I'm a divorcee, right? And having kids on top of that, when you're going through a divorce, it just magnifies that, right? And again, this is why we do what we do. This is why we go out and we teach. This is why we go and we talk. You know, we were in California teaching duty-driven deterioration, and we always invite spouses to attend, because the key is self-awareness for not only the officer, but the spouse. Right. Educating the spouse on what we go through as law enforcement, as first responders. And in this particular case, we had a young officer who was, he was like we all were in the very beginning. We're overly excited with what we're doing. His young spouse was sitting next to him. And I gave the example, as I do in every one of my classes. I say, hey, sir, I'm your sergeant. Pretend like I'm your sergeant. I need you to hold over because the next team they're shorthanded. Will you hold over for me? Without even thinking, that young officer said, yeah, I'll hold over. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate you. Right. And then I talked a little bit, and then I came back. Hey, it's Tuesday. Team isn't holding over, or they don't have enough officers. I need you to hold over. Can you hold over for me, sir? Oh yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. You're a team player. Thank you very much. Third day, same thing. Fourth day, right? And he's saying yes. And I'm thanking him. I'm giving praise. I say, hey, you know what, officer? You are reliable. You're my go-to person. It's Friday. Can you hold over for 4 hours? And I tell the kid, I go, hey, by the way, you have date night scheduled with your spouse, but I need you to hold over. I need you to be a team player. What do you do? He goes, I'm going to work. And I looked at his spouse and I asked her, I go, ma'am, how do you feel right now? If this really happened, how does that make you feel? She goes, neglected. And the look on his face He had no clue because what he saw was, I'm a dedicated cop. I'm dedicated to my profession. In the meantime, he's ignoring his family life. That right there, and you could tell all the veteran officers were like, "Ooh, don't do that!" Right? They're trying to coax him into answering the correctly. But because he's so young and he's excited, he wants to be on the streets. And this is what we talk about. This is why we want spouses there to attend, because now she understands what we're going to go through because she sat in on the entire class. And now he's got that self-awareness. I need to have a fine balance here, right? I can't ignore, because when I ignore my family, when I ignore my own personal needs, I now become over-invested. I am over-invested in my career as a cop. No doubt he's a dedicated cop. I have no doubt about it. But he's over-invested because he's ignoring what's at home.
He needs to
Yeah,
show that
good
same
point.
dedication to his family.
Exactly.
what?
Right? Imagine if somebody would have taught us this early in our careers, how different things could have been, right?
Yeah.
But nobody talks about that. We don't like to talk about it because it's like taboo or it's weird. But John, you're right. We're almost 3 times higher likelihood to commit suicide, right? And like you said, you spot on. The bad guys, they're not our worst enemy. It's us. It's right up here. This is our worst enemy.
Yeah, most
Right?
unfortunately.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, it's not until probably the last few years that I realized that the big difference here and what people have to grow and accept is the difference between role and identity. And what you identify as is your personal values, right? And that role that you're in has to align with those personal values, right? So my personal values are service, commitment, and leadership, right? And it has nothing to do with necessarily the police department or military, right? It's service to my community, service to my family, right? Commitment to my community, commitment to my family, and leadership, leading myself well, right? Because the first leadership role you have is to lead yourself, and you can't lead other people until you lead yourself well. And I think that's something that people have to realize, and that comes through personal growth, right? So when I first retired from the police department, I was miserable. I got hurt in the line of duty. I retired a month before the captain's exam. I was dejected. I was in a really dark place. I mean, Mary looked over at me one day. I'm sitting on the couch and she's like, "What's the matter with you?" I'm like, nothing. I'm all right. And then she came in. It was a Saturday morning. She goes, "Today was the captain's test, wasn't it?" I go, "Yeah, yeah." And my identity was my role, right? And then fast forward, how I got out of that is that service, commitment, and leadership piece. I started volunteering at my kid's school. I started a stop and drop program all as a volunteer. Then I got onto the school board, which I would have never thought I would have. And then eventually I got elected to I'm a state elected official now, right? 19 years ago, if you told me that when I retired from the police department, I would have said, "There's no way that's happening." And the reason why I share that is my identity has never changed. The roles have, and the roles don't necessarily have to be in professional roles. My role as a father has changed. My role as a husband has changed. Chris, that scenario that you gave, that was me my first 5 years on the job. I met my wife when I had 5 years on, just before I got promoted to sergeant. And I probably worked more overtime, probably ignored her, right? We had a newborn son, right? My son was born the day before 9/11, right? I wound up going back to work. I took all the overtime because I had a new family. It got to the point where she had to tell me, "Listen, why don't you not do overtime this weekend? You haven't seen your son in 2 weeks." And that's a reality I had to face. And as you were telling that story, that was coming into my head. And I was like, holy cow, that was me. And now I put my role as a father, as a husband before I put anything else. Because if I can't support them in what they need and put their needs first, then how am I going to help others in the profession that I'm in? And I think but that takes time. And it's not, and the reason why I was able to get to that place now is because of coaching and because of not only having coaches, mentor me, but also me being able to coach others. And I want our clients to know that we get as much out of coaching as they do. Because I leave a session and I go, holy cow. I go, that was a personal growth moment.
It's therapeutic for you as well. It's cathartic in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Mike, thank you so much I feel like you just connected all the dots beautifully. I was thinking the same thing when we're talking about relationships and self-harm and marriages and mistakes. These are all things that if you have no other identity outside of policing, then all of these things can threaten that identity. And that's when we see people spiraling into drugs, alcohol, and other behaviors that are harmful. So, I feel as someone who's been on the other side now, I feel a bit of privilege in that, like you, it's like, I know who I am. I know that I am a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm all these things, and they come before the job. But there's a lot of younger folks in the career field that might not have that luxury of experience in knowing who they are, and they're still looking for that identity. And I would say, especially how it pertains to the topic of failing forward, if you are not sure yet who you are, it is your job to find out. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is by trying things. And not everything's going to work out. So I would encourage people to look at potential mistakes or potential risk as an opportunity to learn more about yourself. And, it's really just feedback on, okay, I guess I'm not this person, or, this really speaks to me. So as far as making mistakes and feeling bad about it, I think it's just an experiment in learning who you are if you don't already know yet.
So
Thank you.
it just dawned on me just now, and I might have mentioned this in one of our other podcasts. I know I talked about this somewhere else. I got invited to this podcast, and the podcast was called Forever Forward. And I remember looking up the podcast. I wanted to be prepared to see kind of in the direction they were going to maybe go. And it pulls up this country song called Forever Forward. And one of the lyrics is, the past doesn't define me, it refines me. And that was really like inspirational to me. And it really made a lot of sense when I think about where I had been on the police department and going through a lot of struggles, and now even post police department having to struggle again, to where I am now, kind of like what Mike described 19 years later. But here's another interesting thing I just wanted to bring up. And it's just another side for anyone that's out there that maybe doesn't feel like they identify as police, but they still struggle with different aspects. I think I fit in that category. I got to be honest with you guys. I questioned my career choice for a long time. Even on the other side of it, I questioned it until it dawned on me, going through a lot of self-work and stuff. I finally came to the realization that it chose me and I didn't choose it. I share all that because my struggles weren't, oh, you got to stay for overtime. For whatever reason, and I think maybe because my dad was on the police department and he kind of helped me, I kind of knew what the culture was and some of the pitfalls. My biggest struggle, guys, it wasn't the people out in the street that were trying to do me harm. And this is part of the problem with, like John talked about, it was the people I was working with. I felt unappreciated by the people with certain people I worked with, that seeped into my personal life. So it almost was a triggering effect. If I felt unappreciated in my marriage, it was like something was set off in me. And I was, it was difficult to communicate. It was like I was very cynical and bitter for a long time because I couldn't get over the fact that there were people that I worked with that didn't care for me. And I think we can all agree we've experienced that. And it's part of the biggest problem in this whole thing right now. John mentioned it. I think we've all mentioned it in different ways. If you're not being supported by your agency, and not to point fingers, that creates so much damage within. We already know we're getting it out in the field. You take the job knowing that, but you don't expect it from your own people. And that's part of the reason why, in my humble opinion, that people aren't reaching out and taking advantage of these services that are being offered. because there's a trust issue. And there's a trust issue from the top down to the bottom up. We all have to take ownership, but if you feel that if you fall and no one's going to be there within your agency to pick you up, you tell me. Why would you tell anyone anything?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, because sometimes the inside, what's inside the department. I used to look at my agency like almost like a parent, right? I'm a kid, and the department's my mom and dad, right? And I always told myself, if I ever got in trouble, if I ever needed anything, the department would be there to rescue me, to help me, right? And then my 13th year, I hit rock bottom, depression, anxiety. I was dealing with PTS, and the department never came. The department wasn't there to help me. And I think it was at that point for me, I realized I cannot rely on the department to rescue me. I have to rely on myself, because I kept thinking of my first assignment was working narcotics. My handler told me, he goes, when you're inside of a drug house and you're buying drugs, if a bad guy pulls out a knife or a gun, don't expect me to come in there and rescue you. Don't expect a team to come in and rescue you. We could have an entire SWAT team waiting at the front door to make entry, but they're not going to get in fast enough. You have to take the initiative. You have to fight your way out, figure out a way to get out of there, right? And because he told me those words came back to me, I was waiting for the department to rescue me, and they never came. And because I heard that, this is what got me into this whole coaching journey. What can I do daily to maintain that level of balance, right? Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, a police department is nothing more than a bunch of bricks and mortar and iron. It's a building. A police department is designed for public safety. Operations have to continue. So if you quit or you get fired or you retire, guess what? Big deal. Business as usual, because that's what public safety is. Now, that being said, at the individual level for the officer, you have to take ownership of get yourself to where you need to get yourself. Don't ever expect anybody, not the department, to get you there. Now, for the departments listening, if you want to have longevity in your officers and you want to have healthy officers that make the right decisions when they need to, you might want to invest in your officers, invest in counseling, invest in coaching, invest in things that are going to help them. Because right now, what I'm seeing, because there's such a low in numbers hiring people, is I'm seeing departments spending thousands upon thousands of dollars for marketing to get recruitment, to get people in, right? And it's like you're throwing money away when you could be reinvesting that into your agency, into your officers who are already there. You've got experience. John, you mentioned earlier going to work. I don't know if this was your own personal experience or something you saw, but going to work drunk. Your agency could have fired that individual, right?
Yeah, it was me.
It was you. Okay, they could have fired you, and right. But they instead they looked at you and said, "Well, wait, this is John Kelly, man. He's got this and this all these years with us. Why do we want to just turn our back on him? Why not reinvest in him? Let's get him the help that he needs so that he can come back to work." Right? Not every department does that, sadly. Instead, they will turn their back on you and they will fire you. But again, it comes back to I need to take care of myself. What am I going to do so this doesn't happen again?
So just one last thing, and I don't know if I made myself completely clear. It wasn't a danger piece in terms of the job coming to save me. Personally, for me, and Mike, you might appreciate this, for our agency, and it's happening now tenfold, there's a lot of hypocrisy. You got major egos, this political struggle within the department, and I recognize that at a very young age. And I struggled with that. It affected me on a level where it created bitterness. I had a hard time making peace with that. And it infiltrated into my personal life within the construct of my marriage. That was just me. I mean, I'm not saying everyone is like that. For me, the police identity wasn't the issue. It was this other piece where I felt almost betrayed by my agency because of that hypocritical way of thinking. The do as I say, not as I do mentality, if that makes sense. I couldn't get past that.
I want to jump in really quick because we're coming around on the hour mark and I want to wrap up, but there's a couple points I wanted to talk about too. So we've mentioned, John has shared, showing up to work drunk. And I want to, we've talked about it a little bit, but I want to pause on that because first of all, John, you are a top leader in this wellness space. You are flying around the country. You are teaching, you are speaking, you are coaching, you are helping, you are influencing, you're mentoring. And part of that comes because of your personal, we can call it a failure or whatever, but your issues that you had. The fact that your department did not fire you, that you were able to get help. Not only does that help the individual, but here's the thing. If you send somebody, you see someone struggling, whether it's alcohol or addiction, or they're just struggling, but you get them the resources, they get help, they get better. Guess what? That makes them a better cop. It makes them a better human. It makes them, when they're going, okay, bear with me, I'm all the tangents here, but say it is alcohol, right? You get your officer, they go get help. They are now clean and sober. You put them back on the street. You know that they're clean and sober. They go out, they're dealing with somebody that's an alcoholic. Guess what? They're going to be a better officer because they can now understand and help that person be like, hey, you know what? Here's my story. Let's get you some resources. It's all about helping everybody. And as you guys were talking about, the department's not going to come save you. It's just a building. The department and the people within the department are there to serve and protect the community. So yes, you are having your own personal existential crisis. The world isn't going to stop for you because there's all of these other people out there that also are needing help. So again, the self-awareness, the accountability, but the departments also, if you want to save your people, again, just echoing what's already been said, getting them, we have the resources. The excuses, I think we can all say, old way of thinking, dinosaur model, we gotta evolve with it. So on that little Tami tangent, I didn't get a Tami tangent on this one because you guys shared so much good information. But I want to honor everybody's time. So as we always do, I'd like to go around and just have everybody share, your 30-second mic drop moment. If somebody were to just tune in to this part of the episode, what is your piece of guidance or advice for the listener when it comes to failing forward? Whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. I would say failure isn't always the end all. It's not the end of the world. And I will say, on a call that I actually responded to towards the latter half of my career, a guy tried to commit suicide, right? Shot himself in the head. It failed, right? So he called 911. So we get to his house. He's standing in the garage, covered in blood and in excruciating pain, right? So we get the fire department to come out there and come check him out. Well, in the meantime, me and another officer went inside the house to make sure it was clear. We see a noose hanging and a stool. And so we asked ourselves, did he try to hang himself first? And we continued throughout the house and we see a big knife, a kitchen knife with blood on the tip. Did he try to stab himself? And then on the counter, there's spilled over prescription medication that's all gone. Did this guy just try to take overdose on medication? Yeah, the guy tried to kill himself 4 different ways and he failed. He did try to overdose. It didn't work. He tried to hang himself. It didn't work. He tried to stab himself in the heart. It didn't work. And then lastly, he tried to shoot himself in the head. It didn't work. You could say this guy failed at death, but is that a good thing? Yeah, I think it is because he's still alive and he's still here. So sometimes failing can actually be a blessing in disguise here. And by the way, the ER nurses and the doctors had never seen this. They were shocked that this guy did all of this and still wasn't able to kill himself. So again, look at that failure. What can you learn from it?
So I
Who's next?
think when we talk about failure, right? And Chris, you just hit the nail on the head, right? It's about learning. So listen, and this isn't just about work. This is about everything in your life, right? So when you try something and you overcome that fear, right? And what's fear? Fear is, right, false evidence appearing real. So you're going to attempt to try and do something that maybe is making you feel uncomfortable, right? So you're going to test it, right? You're going to test that option. You may fail. The piece that really matters is many times people test, they fail, and then they don't learn and they just re-enter and try it again. There's 2 pieces in there that really need to really be, we need to be mindful of, right? We need to test. If we fail, we got to learn from it. But then this is the key piece here: improve. Don't just say, oh, I made that mistake and re-enter. Improve how you are going to make that second attempt. And sooner or later, it's going to work out and you're going to succeed, right? But if you don't take that opportunity to learn from it and also improve, then you're just going to do that vicious cycle of failing.
Yeah. So it's funny, like they say, the first sign of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? So the way I look at it, from my perspective, comes down to vulnerability, meaning we come from a profession where we're the ones in control. We're the ones that have the spotlight on us. We're under a microscope. We have to be perfect. We carry that over into our personal lives. So we carry this persona of being the guy or girl, and we can't be vulnerable. It protects us, right? But when the uniform comes off, then what? So I feel if we're able to acknowledge our own individual vulnerability and recognize, okay, I'm not going to be perfect. There will come times when I do make mistakes, to acknowledge it, learn from it, but then take action steps to evolve. Not point, because we all know this. We're in a career where everyone's pointing the finger. They pointed at us, we pointed at them, right? CYA we used to use on the police department, right? Mike, cover your ass.
Yep.
Right? We live in that mentality of cover your ass. And we fail to realize we're not infallible. So there's a vulnerability piece to that. And I feel we're all fortunate enough now, being on the other side where we've evolved in our own way. We get that, because we wouldn't be on this public forum if we didn't understand that it's okay to be vulnerable, that there is strength in vulnerability. And maybe by showing that and sharing that, there are people out there now that are listening that could say, you know what, that resonates with me. And maybe they will lean in, recognize that, take ownership, and then take action. And we're all in positions to help facilitate that, if that makes sense.
Excellent point.
John and Tiffany, what are your final little thoughts?
I'll just say, failure, and Mike hit it thoroughly. Failure in and of itself is no bueno, right? It's what you do with the information received from the failure, and how you get back up and taking a different approach. And if you so technically, right, if you're not failing, you're not growing. That's where the positive comes in. You grow by pushing that boundary. And when you push it to the edge where you fail, you extrapolate the lessons learned, and you get back up and you attack it from a different angle. And that's where the growth occurs. And that's a choice that everybody has to make. That's a personal choice to either learn from the failure and grow or not.
Tiffany?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to say anything that hasn't already been said. I think everyone has brought up some just very valid points, and that I think what's important is to reframe failure as something that is always negative into a learning opportunity, and just see it as a way to improve yourself. And if you do find that you are stuck in rumination, or you're stuck in not being able to get over that mistake, or you haven't learned from it, hopefully you have the self-awareness to see that that's what's going on, then look closer at that failure and see if it isn't an old script playing out, if it isn't something that has, is, like I said before, under the thing that's under the thing. And, just be curious about yourself and your identity. If you are spending a lot of time worrying about a failure, it might be time to check your ego and remember what is important. Remember what you're really in this for. And I think 99% of the problems, 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, are very not important. when it comes to what is really important at life right now.
Thank you guys all. I mean, amazing insights, and there's so many little nuggets of wisdom throughout the whole conversation. My little final 2 cents, there's a couple parts. Rejection sometimes is for your protection. So if you failed to get a promotion, you failed to get something that you thought you should have, sometimes that could be a blessing in disguise and the best thing for you. If we hadn't failed with our first business attempt, we wouldn't be here today. I'm so thankful for that failure. So protected, so thankful. On that note, there's so much more that we could talk about and unpack. But if you are tuning in and listening, you can check us out: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're across the board. If you want to be a guest on one of the episodes, please feel free to reach out. We always have, candid conversations, because we want somebody out there needs to hear what each of you has to say. Clearly, some of these issues are a universal problem that it takes the total team effort to move that needle forward. And I think we're seeing it slowly but surely. We're getting there. So thank you all for tuning in, and until next week.